Do you have any idea about poverty? Do you know how poor China was? So today we're gonna talk about this. Hello guys, welcome to my channel. It's me, Rachel, a self-English learner from China. It has been more than 3 years now since I decided to learn this language seriously, and I'm really happy I can keep on learning something by myself for so long. But on the other hand, I don't have many opportunities to use it in my daily life. I feel it's such a waste of time if I don't do something in English. So I created this channel trying to write and speak English and share my thoughts and life here in China. I think it's a good way to practice and communicate. Recently, I was searching for English materials to read for practice. Then I saw a video called Top 10 Countries by GDP, 1896 to 2022. According to that video, from China's fluctuating rankings, I see the turbulent history of over a century. It also reminds me of the very impoverished life I had in my childhood, a kind of life that is hard to imagine for those who haven't experienced it. I mentioned a little situation in my dog meat video, but today I wanted to share more about this. I was born in Sichuan province in a small village in the middle of China. Among the mountains, I had a very poor childhood in the early years between 2000. At this time, China had already begun to develop. According to that video, China's GDP ranking was 7 globally, but considering the country's vast population, which was approximately 1.2 billion back then, it was not significant. Moreover, the benefits of this development had not reached the remote towns where information was scarce. I can still remember running down the street on cold winter mornings in thin clothes, shouting that spring had arrived, simply because spring meant warmer weather. Spring also meant the Spring Festive, Chinese New Year, the most important holiday for Chinese people. We would eat meat and buy new clothes, although I hardly ever received new clothes on that day. Food was probably the major problem for me back then. My foreign friends still think Chinese people are eating things like bugs, rats, and some weird things even I haven't heard of before. But I wanted to tell you that these things were even luxury food back then. My grandmother told me her mom even ate something called guanyin soil, which is basically mud. This thing could only provide a feeling of fullness, but couldn't be digested and had to manually extract it. Use the hand, let it out from. My grandma told me a lot of similar stories. They were something beyond my imagination. Although I was also very poor when I was a child, but not as difficult as this. As you can see, I'm not very tall due to lack of food during my childhood. For a long time, I could only eat things like rice with potatoes that provide energy but not the nutrients necessary for growth. I always felt hungry but had nothing to eat. Sometimes I didn't have breakfast, and it made it hard for me to concentrate fully on my studies. But fortunately, I'm naturally good at studying and never gave up learning no matter how hard life was. And food hygiene was a big problem too. I don't know if you know what is a scare right? I used to get it because of dirty foods. Oh my god, I really don't want to remember the sight of a bunch of bugs coming out of my gut. Don't try to search it if you have no idea about it. Fortunately, the school provided deworming medication every year, which separates us from more suffering. This is the reason I hate people wasting food. There are a lot of food wasting short videos online. That's really made me feel disgusting. This is also the reason I don't like people from countries with an abundance of resources that waste a lot of food are trying to teach me what is right and wrong to eat. Sorry about that, but yeah. Except for food, clothes were the other big problem. Like I mentioned before, I didn't like winter that much because it is only cold, and I didn't have enough thick clothes. I don't know if you ever heard a thing called a chilblain. Back then during winter, I used to get chilblain on my hands and feet because of the cold. It made them swell up and itch like crazy, and sometimes even break open. Lots of my classmates had it too, so bad that their hands and feet were oozing, and they couldn't even hold a pen to do homework. And they still had to help out at home doing all sorts of heavy farm work, even though they were just little kids in elementary school. My friends from the county used to mock us, saying none of our clothes fit us properly. At the time, I didn't see the problem because having clothes to wear was already good enough for us. My sister and I often wore our mom's clothes, not for fun but just to stay a little warmer. However, everything was too big, dragging on the ground. The pants were so large I had to tie them with a rope around my waist. But they still kept slipping down, making it impossible to run. We could only sit quietly in our seats. Even more disastrous were the shoes. I never had a decent pair. Back then, we were into white shoes, a type of sports shoes. They were required by the school and were cheap, so they became the daily footwear for me and many classmates. However, they provided no warmth and were not waterproof. Once it rained, the entire shoe would get soaked. After a day of classes, walking back home, my feet would be so wet. It feels like I'd shed a layer of skin. You might wonder, what about your parents, the government, the school? Didn't they care? Actually, it never occurred to me to tell them because back then, everyone was in the same boat. It didn't seem like a big deal. I didn't know there were better things. I thought life should be like this. Nothing wrong with it. And even if I did say something, they didn't have extra money to buy better shoes. So I had to figure it out on my own, like stuffing plastic bags and a newspaper into my shoes to make them feel a bit better to wear. So even now, I can buy any clothes and shoes I want, but I never spend a lot of money on designer brands. I don't need the clothes and the shoes to provide me with anything beyond warmth and comfort. Of course, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with buying designer brands. I'm just expressing my personal experience and values. Okay? No need to say the living conditions were also very poor. Before my parents divorced, we lived in a mud brick house with no shower or toilet. If we wanted to bath, we had to heat water in cooking pots and mix in some cold water. You can imagine how cold it would get in winter. During the day, we used the public toilets outside, basically sitting on other people's excrement. I don't want to describe how horrible it was. If you are interested, you can search for it, but better not. At night, we used the chamber pots and threw away of them during the day. Fuck. I really don't want to record those terrifying things. But at the time, there was no sense of hygiene at all because we always lived in such environment. Maybe this is why so many people say that China has no toilets or that the toilets were very dirty. All these changes happened within 20 years, which is unimaginable for many young Chinese people too. If they found me saying this, they might think I'm trying to make it look bad. But without these painful memories, how can we appreciate how amazing these improvements are? So I won't avoid talking about it. And this is just my personal experience. Not everywhere everyone was like this. After my parents divorced, for safety reasons, my dad brought us to live in his shop. He worked as an appliance repairman, and the shop was filled with various parts, tools, and it is assembled appliance. The shop was very narrow with only 2 rooms inside and out. One was the shop. My sister and I squeezed onto a single bed surrounded by various parts inside the shop, while my dad built himself a wooden platform above our bed to sleep on. We endured difficult times in such a cramped space. Even though my dad repaired appliances at the time, TVs and washing machines were becoming common in households. But air conditioners and a refrigerator were still luxury items. They were all power-consuming and too expensive to hold one. Our family never had a washing machine, so we washed clothes by hand. And I started doing it myself in elementary school. On the other hand, because bathing was inconvenient and nobody taught us how to keep hygiene, I often washed my hair only once a week. My hair would get tangled and almost impossible to comb, and I even got lice on my head. I don't know if you ever see a louse. Horrible memory again. If you asked me to live in a house without a shower or toilet now, it would be unimaginable. I can't live without air conditioning anymore, but I still don't like to use them unless it's scorching. Another problem that should be mentioned is the lack of electricity resources. Every year in the 2 or 3 months leading up to the Chinese New Year, the power would go out for around 12 hours each day to store energy for the peak electricity demand during the New Year celebrations. This was really frustrating. My family lived in a small town where the electricity at least supported lights and a television. However, at my grandma's rural home, there wasn't even enough power to turn on the TV, and the lights were barely brighter than candles. This was around the year 2000, more than 200 years after the invention of the electric light bulb. Even today, many places in the world still do not have access to safe and stable electricity. Yet our country managed to solve the electricity issue within a mere 20 years. Nowadays, every household is equipped with a television, refrigerator, washing machine, and air conditioners as a standard appliances. I have witnessed this transformation from nothing to abundance firsthand. So when people criticize us for no reason, I feel like it's both funny and annoying. I feel like arguing back, but then I think, why bother? People can never really understand what others have been through, good or bad. But you know what? We don't need anyone's approval. It's enough that we know our own story. Moreover, you may watch the video that people have to climb mountains and stroll over rivers to commute to school. It's extremely dangerous. Our situation was much better, but still tough back then. Our only means of transportation was the bus, and there was only one road between the county town and our place. Many rural students needed to wake up at 5 a.m. and walk 1 or 2 hours to the town's school every morning, regardless of wind or rain. Even when took the bus, they had to walk a long distance from their homes to reach the main road. Perhaps the bus only ran once every hour. When it was raining, by the time they go to school, their clothes, shoes, and backpacks were already soaked, and they had to attend classes all day in this wet condition. I feel like my situation was already quite bad, but there were others worse off than me. At least I didn't have to walk such a long distance. However, the good thing was that even under such difficult conditions, parents hadn't given up on their children's education. I think none of the above situation compares to the lack of parental love. My parents divorced when I was 9 years old, and as a result, I received a lot of cold stares from relatives and neighbors. Back then, divorce was considered a disgrace, implying that we were children without a proper upbringing. Consequently, adults were unwilling to let their children hang out with me. My father persisted in the home appliance business for a short while before leaving our small town to join the waves of migrant workers heading to the big cities. My sister and I became what was known as left-behind children, a phenomenon unique to that era. Fortunately, with the money they earned working in the city, we were able to buy a house in the county, improving our living conditions. At least we had a separate bathroom and shower. However, it was always just my sister and me rely on each other. Since I graduated from elementary school, I have hardly lived with my parents. Being without our parents hurt more than being poor, but we had no other choice. According to that video, China had already become the world's second largest economy by 2009. Later, the winds of China's reforming and opening up finally reached the inland areas, and gradually benefited my hometown. Thanks to my persistent efforts and self-learning, I was able to catch the boom of China's gaming industry, enter the field, and achieve financial independence. This is the story of my extreme poverty when I was a child. I would like to show you what it looks like in the central area of China and how people live their lives there. I will definitely do so in the future. If you want to see them, please let me know and subscribe me. In my future videos, I will also share how I maintained an optimistic attitude and a positive learning approach in such harsh conditions, held on my dreams and waited for an opportunity to change my fate. I hope my story can bring you some inspiration. Of course, it's not a great success story like getting into a top university in the world or making hundreds of thousands of dollars. But I believe it's because it's just an ordinary story that can really motivate folks like me to keep on going. No matter how tough life gets, always believe that persisting in lives and learning will lead to victory. So this is today's video. Thanks for watching. If you have any question, please leave a comment below and tell me your side of the story. Also, if I made any mistake that confused you, please correct me. I really appreciate your help. So until next time, stay safe, stay positive, and peace. Bye bye.